Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Better Know a Highway, here on Virtual Road Trip, a series where we look at the interstates and highways that cross this vast country of ours. In this episode we have one of the big ones, one of the Zero series, a transcontinental highway that stretches from coast to coast, going through numerous different terrains and landscapes along the way, Interstate 80. Real quick, before we get started, just wanted to remind you to please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't. I always appreciate that. And another quick reminder that VRT memberships are still available. I haven't had anyone sign up yet, but if you want to be the first person to get your name on this cool list, well, you'll be featured before every video just like this. Well, sign up today. The join button is below. And with that out of the way, now let's get started. Interstate 80 is a transcontinental highway stretching across the entire United States, through the heart of the country. It runs for a staggering 2,900 miles, the second longest interstate in the entire system, and, in its western half, follows the general path of the old Lincoln Highway, the first superhighway in America. Let's start on the East Coast for this one, in the state of New Jersey, where I-80 runs for a total of 68 miles. Starting at a junction with the major East Coast Highway I-95, in the shadow of the Manhattan skyline just to the east, I-80 begins in the city of Teaneck, New Jersey, and immediately heads west into the densely populated northern part of the state. Passing by cities such as Newark and Paterson, as well as having junctions with the Garden State Parkway and I-287, the terrain slowly becomes more suburban, and eventually rural, as 80 stays on its western path throughout the state, until eventually reaching the Appalachian mountain range. Here, I-80 encounters and passes through the Delaware Water Gap, a steep valley dug into the local ridge by the Delaware River. 80 takes advantage of this feature to cross the ridge and eliminates the need for a tunnel. 80 enters the gap and the eastern side right at the base of the nearby cliffs, and snakes its way through before crossing the river, where it enters its next state of Pennsylvania, where it then soon exits the gap. I-80 crosses Pennsylvania in a due east-west path for 311 miles. After crossing the Delaware, 80 enters the Stroudsburg, PA area, crossing near the small city and then heading deeper into the nearby Pocono Mountains and the large northern rural part of the state. Staying south of the Wyoming Valley and its population centers, 80 has several junctions with important routes in the area, including a significant junction with the heavily truck-traveled I-81. Moving towards the central part of the state, 80 crosses the Susquehanna River and heads deeper into the Appalachians, passing through the ridge and valley region of the state and threading the many gaps between them. This stretch is extensively rural, with a few towns in the valleys and not much else. Eventually, however, 80 leaves the mountain range behind and finds flatter ground in the western area of Pennsylvania. Several mid-sized towns and cities dot this area as I-80 passes through it, as well as a junction with I-79, which leads travelers to the city of Pittsburgh to the south. Not long after this, 80 crosses the state line into Ohio. I-80 travels for 237 miles within the Buckeye State, with most of it running concurrently as the Ohio Turnpike. Initially passing just north of the city of Youngstown, with a spur, I-680, heading south into it, 80 continues to a complex junction with I-76 just to the west. It's at this point where 80 takes on the Ohio Turnpike designation, when it transfers over from I-76. Drivers must now pay a toll to continue on I-80, with the total price determined by how far they travel. Now under its new designation, 80 moves on west, staying well south of the Cleveland area and cutting through Cuyahoga Valley National Park, while also crossing the river of the same name. Soon after, now heading northwest, 80 has junctions with both I-77 and I-71, before turning back to the west to begin its long concurrency with I-90. Both I-80 and I-90 run together for the next 278 miles. Starting to the west of the Cleveland metro area, the two highways curve ever so slightly as they generally follow the southern shore of Lake Erie. passing south of coastal cities such as Sandusky and eventually reaching the Toledo area. Just to the south of the city, the highways merge with the major north-south running I-75, and then turn due west again, passing through rural areas of western Ohio as they head towards Indiana. I-80 becomes the Indiana toll road upon entering the state, and runs concurrently with other routes throughout its entire length within, most of it with I-90, and the westernmost portion with I-94. The two highways make their way through the northernmost part of Indiana, at times coming within just 200 yards of the border with Michigan, close enough to see the state welcome signs from the exit ramps. Eventually, 8090 reaches the Elkhart and South Bend areas, and skirts just to the north of both, with numerous routes providing access south. A slight bend to the southeast then follows, as Lake Michigan nears, and 80 finally makes its split with I-90 ending the long concurrency at a junction with I-94, and immediately becomes concurrent with that route. Now on the outskirts of Gary, Indiana, the newly minted 8094 stays on a western course out of the state. Illinois is the next state up, and I-80 travels for 163 miles within it. Staying a good ways south of the downtown Chicago area, 80 quickly leaves its initial concurrency with I-94 after just a little over a mile into the state. It then begins yet another concurrency with the spur I-294 for a total of 12 more miles. Both routes head north as they separate, and finally, after nearly 300 miles, I-80 exists on its own as it heads further west, where it soon reaches the city of Joliet and then into the vast plains of north-central Illinois. Drifting further away from the urban centers near Chicago, 80 passes through the state with minimal fanfare, passing a few smaller settlements. Near the city of Peru, Illinois, 80 has a junction with I-39, which leads drivers to areas of the state further north and south. Continuing through the rural landscape, 80 then arrives at the Quad Cities region and the Mississippi River. 80 makes a partial beltway around the four cities, with I-280 completing it. Making a turn to the north after connecting with the spur, 80 slowly turns back to the west, and as it does so, it crosses the Mississippi River into Iowa, at which it runs for a total of 303 miles in that state. Now north of the cities and past the river, 80 has a junction with the northern terminus of I-74. Then, it meets with the other end of I-280, thus completing the beltway, and then leaves the region, heading deeper into the cornfields of Iowa. This long stretch of open landscape is interrupted by places such as Iowa City, and eventually, the state capital of Des Moines, where 80 once again serves as a partial beltway along with a local spur, and also junctions with the major route I-35, complete with a short concurrency. Beyond here, 80 makes a straight line path further west, then a sudden turn southwest until reaching the Missouri River near the city of Council Bluffs, and after a junction with I-29. 80 then crosses the aforementioned river into Nebraska. For 455 long miles, I-80 crosses the vast plains of Nebraska, the most distance of any state on the route. Immediately after crossing the state line, 80 is already in the state's largest metro area, running just south of the city of Omaha and into the nearby suburbs, with two local spurs heading north into and around the city proper. From here, 80 travels southwest towards the state capital of Lincoln, where it passes just at the edge with the spur I-180 providing direct access to the state government offices. A turn back to due west brings 80 eventually to its next major feature, the long meandering Platte River, which it encounters just south of the city of Grand Isle, Nebraska. The highway will then follow the river for quite a distance from here on out. Slowly curving and snaking its way through the gradual upward tilt of the high plains, 80 will reach the city of North Platte, where the Platte River splits into its two main tributary branches, both north and south. 80 continues along the south branch as it heads into the Nebraska Panhandle. Here, it comes within mere miles of the Colorado border, as it has a junction with the other version of I-76, this one leading into Colorado and eventually the city of Denver. However, I-80 keeps on its due west orientation, leaving the course of the river and passing through a few small plains towns before crossing the western state line. 80 traverses Wyoming along its southern portion for 402 miles, connecting several cities separated by vast uninhabited lands. Once in the state, it's not long before 80 reaches yet another state capital, this time Cheyenne, Wyoming, while also junctioning with another major north-south highway, this time I-25. After leaving Cheyenne, 80 passes through a series of cities such as Laramie, Rawlins, Rock Springs, and Evanston, while also stretching through Wyoming's famous open terrain, often with harsh windy conditions, especially in winter. At times, the winds are so severe that the highway needs to be shut down completely due to drifting snow, which is not a rare event. Next up, I-80 enters the state of Utah for a 197-mile-long trip. Having an early junction with the western version of I-84 near the Echo Reservoir, it then makes a long, gradual curve to the southwest, passing in the vicinity of Park City, Utah, and its large ski resort, before making a cut through the Wasatch Range via the Parley Summit Pass, reaching an elevation of 7,016 feet. Descending down from the mountains, 80 enters the Salt Lake Valley, and immediately into Salt Lake City itself. 80 then junctions with the long-running I-15 just south of the downtown area, and has a short 2.5-mile concurrency that heads further into the city before 80 breaks off from 15 and heads west out of this urban area, then passing just to the south of the Great Salt Lake itself, at times right on its shore. Leaving the lake and passing through some dry desert hills, I-80 enters perhaps the most unique feature it, or any other highway for that matter, will encounter along its route, the Bonneville Salt Flats, which is the dried-up bed of an ancient sea. The region is remarkably flat, with no obstacles in the way, perfect for land speed records and endless off-roading. Thankfully, 80 remains paved throughout it, as it charts perhaps the straightest path a highway can take, until it reaches the other side and the city of Wendover. Here, 80 crosses the state line into Nevada. 80 cuts a lonely, snake-like path through the desolate desert basin of the Silver State for 410 miles, connecting the few settlements that exist in this area. The small city of West Wendover is built just over the state line, complete with several casinos and resorts. Quickly, however, once moving west, civilization ends and empty terrain begins. 80 gradually crosses the state, reaching a few more small cities such as Wells, Elko, and Winnemucca, along with other small desert towns along the way. Hundreds of miles of nothingness separate them, however, and drivers are cautioned to prepare for the conditions. A final stretch to the southwest brings I-80 into one of the larger metro areas within the state, the Reno-Carson City region. 80 directly serves the city of Reno, bisecting it, while a local spur, I-580, leads travelers south towards Carson City and the Capital District. Once past Reno, 80 will begin a significant climb upward in elevation, as it enters its most treacherous terrain yet, once it crosses its final state line. I-80's final state on its westward path is California, where it travels through a diverse spectrum of terrains for 199 miles. Beginning in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, a steep incline from the state line brings drivers to the highest point on all of I-80 at Donner Pass, with an elevation of 7,239 feet. This stretch of 80 in this area, near Truckee, California, is particularly difficult for travel any time of year, but in winter it is especially so. Tire chains for trucks are a necessity, and severe blizzards regularly snarl traffic to a standstill, causing closure of the highway. 80 continues through mountainous lands as well as the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, slowly turning to the southwest as it eventually descends into the Great Central Valley of California, and into the city of Sacramento, servicing yet another state capital. Here, I-80 has its last major junction, this time with the West Coast running I-5, just north of the capital city. Continuing on, 80 makes its way through the many towns and cities in the region, eventually leaving the Central Valley to cross into the San Francisco Bay Area, where it first reaches the Oakland vicinity, passing through many of its northern suburbs along the bay, and junctioning with two spurs, I-580 and I-880, that head further into the city, while 80 itself makes a sharp turn to the west to cross the bay via the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. Running as a collection of separate spans, separated by a tunnel near the midpoint, the Bay Bridge is one of the longest bridges in the entire interstate system, and an engineering marvel in itself. The entire bridge complex runs for a total of 4.5 miles and is built to withstand the many earthquakes felt in the area. Averaging around 26,000 vehicles per day, the bridge is a more than crucial link for the heavy populated area, and a toll is collected for westbound drivers only. Once across, 80 has a final short section in downtown San Francisco, passing just a few blocks from Market Street, as well as local stadiums and numerous other landmarks. Just a couple miles into the city, and with only a couple of heavily congested exits along the way, I-80 finally terminates at a junction with US Route 101, the Pacific Highway, which continues on to the ocean of the same name. This thus ends 80's epic 2,900-mile run. Well, that's going to do it for this extended episode of Better Know a Highway. And what an episode it was. It took a lot of work to get this one out. That's why it took a little extra time, but well worth it, I think. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a little something along the way. And before you go, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. I always appreciate that. If you want to support this channel, memberships are available. Just click the join button below. Also, announcements and discussion beyond just these videos is available in the VRT Discord. The link for that is in the description below as well. And that's going to do it for this episode, but until next time, make sure you enjoy the ride. And up next, Interstate 79. And I'll see you then.